All right. I grind for the love of the game, not for no 4 years, 80 million. I grind for the love of the game, did a Rockets deep dive, and found me a villain.
Ooh, man, coming in with aggression to my boy Dillon Brooks.
I mean, the only reason I really wanted to do a Rockets deep dive is so I could trash Dillon Brooks for 25, 35 minutes.
I also just am basically going to defend him, and then I'm going to leave, and I'm just going to let you go on a solo rant against him because I'm not going to stand and be a party to this.
It's like that scene in Wayne's World where they get signed and they're all of a sudden like in the big leagues, and like Wayne gets fired and Garth's like sitting there and he's like, I'm having a good time. Not. Are you saying you'll abandon me live?
Everybody has their lines, and Dillon Brooks. I got some loyalty with him, so we'll see. We'll see how aggressive the takes get on him.
You're not the only Dillon Brooks apologist and loyalist in my life. I will say that. And
Really,
both of you are good fantasy players. So shout out Spidey if you're watching on YouTube.
Amazing! Wow, there's at least two of us.
Yeah, yep. He has his supporters. So as we kind of alluded to there, and I think we mentioned on our last podcast, we're just going to hyper focus on one of the most interesting teams to us this offseason. Just one of these like loaded with young, talented players, and now loaded with these expensive veterans. So just kind of going through it and trying to get a timeline of like this rebuild. Since Ime Udoka was hired in late May, the Rockets have begun what somebody dubbed phase 2 of the rebuild that began with James Harden's trade in January of 2021. So the Houston Rockets have won just 25% of their games in the last 3 seasons. So when I say 25% of their games, does that sound like less or more than you'd think they would have won the last 3 seasons?
That's a pretty paltry number. That's less, I think. Yeah, I mean, when you just think about the Hornets, how many games they win, that's a tiny number. It's hard to do.
It's shocking. And they've had cheers, pour a little something out for Steven Silas. He seemed like a great bloke. Your dad was a Seattle Supersonic and an NBA champion. Paul Silas, rest in peace. But yeah, so Ime Udoka comes on, and I think the team's kind of taken shape under him, a little more to his style of play. So let's just run through those additions real quick. I wanted to give everyone a lay of the land. So as many of you know, Fred VanVleet has come over for 4 years, 120 million. Dillon Brooks, I'll call
3
him
years.
Dillon.
Wasn't it 3 years?
It was 3 years. Good catch.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I got the 4 stuck in my head because it's 40 million a season, which is just wild. So
it's huge. It's massive.
Yeah. And again, I think like you got to pay somebody. And before you're going to do some of these extensions on the rookie deals, I got the VanVleet thing like we talked about, but then you get into paying Dillon Brooks 4 years, 80 million, when you have, I think, who will turn out to be and we'll get into it, but you have Tari Eason on the roster, so you might have had a cheaper version of what you paid for there. Then you have the 4th overall pick in June, Amen Thompson. Really enjoyed watching some of his film. And then you have Cam Whitmore, who somehow fell to them at pick 20. And then you got some on the margins guys. You got the big Jacques Landale. You have a couple of veteran guards in Aaron Holiday and Patty Mills. And then you have Jeff Green. So those are the additions. What kind of jumps out to you when I just kind of run through those names and you're thinking of the Rockets roster with those players now?
Well, starting at the bottom, I feel like one under the radar thing that I think is going to have a fantasy impact, not because what he's going to do, but because what he's going to take away. One guy that I have a close eye on is actually Jeff Green. I mean, he was just the 7th man on the Nuggets who won the championship. So clearly he's playing at a high level. They selected him, they paid him. And I kind of am really curious, especially with this Ime Udoka, because coaches want to win games. And I think the most interesting thing to see play out over the course of this of the situation is that push and pull. I mean, as you alluded to, the whole roster is either these high paid vets, which they just brought in, they brought in for a purpose. And then on the other hand, you have all these young, high development guys that were super high draft picks. So their roster, I mean, you just ran through all these guys. They're 12 deep. I mean, there's 12 guys that should be getting real minutes. They should be getting at least 7th, 8th man minutes. So it's going to be interesting to see who falls out of that. I think I'm curious about the Jeff Green one because he plays at a position of so many of these other young guys that I suspect they're going to find minutes, and we're all going to be pretty frustrated about how much a 37-year-old or whatever it is Jeff Green is getting played.
Jeff Green's one of those veterans that's you can't hand to a coach like Udoka, who's just taken over this young team and like, was kind of disgraced in the public eye to his own doing. And so he's come back, and yeah, I just think he's going to fall into those traps and just going through the rotation. I mean, some of the players Jeff Green will have to siphon minutes from. It's just not what you want in a rebuilding situation. So just to kind of set the scene, the player with the 9th most minutes per game last season on the Rockets was Dayshawn Nix, who they cut on June 29th. Just kind of gives you an idea of like the amount of minutes that are really available for these guys. And so to get ready for this, I was kind of trying to go through that and figure out how the minutes would look. So to do that, you got to figure out, okay, where are the minutes coming from? So last year, let's pull this back up. So here are the subtractions. So I want to start with Eric Gordon. This is interesting. He was traded on February 9th. He was playing 30 minutes per game in 47 games. But that trade is actually what brought them the first round pick, which became Cam Whitmore. So that's pretty impressive. They had to take on John Wall's salary. But so the 30
Whitmore,
minutes.
Summer League MVP.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, dude. Yeah, he pops on film. We'll see how he actually turns out as a pro. But he was a classic summer league sensation.
Yeah, he was built for summer league. I think the scoring was a little bit, maybe you expect that, but I think what really was eye-opening to me was the fact that he averaged 3 steals a game. I think he had a game where he had 8 steals. I think you don't just luck into that. So that is something that you're like, okay, they kind of have something here.
Those defensive stats in the preseason, that's a great point you bring up, have been very telling in the past when you're trying to see like the blueprint of a player. That stuff does translate. Yeah. So when you get those big, I think Donovan Mitchell, I remember Chris Vernon brought it up on a recent, maybe a month ago or so.
That's right.
He had like a 10 steal game in summer league, and that's what made Vernon go, wait, hold on, what the hell? And that stuff kind of translates in those sample sizes. So that's a good call. So you have Eric Gordon, who went out the door, obviously, last February. KJ Martin, some minutes on the wing freed up, his 28 minutes in 82 games. Unfortunately, for fans of his fantasy game, he's probably going to fade into the Clipper wing obscurity for next year, but that's for another day. They gave away a young wing in Josh Christopher, who I think that breakup was pretty mutual. In 64 games, he played 12 minutes, so it frees up 12 minutes. The aforementioned Dayshawn Nix, who was absolutely terrible. No offense to the Knicks family. He was playing 60 minutes a game and 57 games. He was just waived. A younger player who I think maybe they'll regret giving away is University of Kentucky legend Ty Washington. Don't want to talk about his landing spot. You're welcome to if you'd like. 14 minutes and 31 games. So those mostly came, in true garbage time last year.
Yeah.
So I kind of run through that just to.
Didn't they give up another guy, Garba or
Garuba, that big guy?
Garuba. Yep. Yeah, I thought he had some potential, but then he never got any minutes, so maybe he didn't.
Well, now the minutes that Sengun fans were worried about Garuba taking last year, now we have the big Jacques Londell looming to take some of those minutes, and other guys. We'll get into that, but kind of what jumped out to me was like the additions on the Rockets heavily outweighs the subtractions as far as minutes, which makes kind of a puzzle for projecting the minutes and the rotations and how they're going to shake out. So yeah, any big takeaways as far as the comings and the goings for you?
Yeah, I think just one more big picture before diving into some of these players is you could tell, you talked about entering phase 2, phase 3, phase whatever it is.
Phase 2, they're just floating around the Rockets media.
Phase 2. I think the big thing is that the Rockets, and this is the Rockets owe their first round pick to the Thunder next year, and it's top 5 protected. So in all likelihood is probably going to convey, and there was a clear a message sent from ownership that we do not want to be giving away a really high pick to the Thunder. We want to try to compete now. And so you could tell that by the moves they brought in. The one guy, and so I think that's really going to be super interesting when they actually get into what these rotations are. And I'm sure we're going to talk about these a little bit more, but when push comes to shove, what exactly is the patience level? Where it's been sky high, it seems like all of a sudden is is the moment that that Thompson kind of misses a rotation. Is he about to get yanked in favor of Jeff Green? Like maybe
such a great point. That's what makes it sitting here in early August impossible to really, if anyone's sitting there and they're telling you, okay, 28 minutes to this guy, 26 minutes to this guy, and here's why, they're lying, because of that's a great reason why, because we don't know how it's going to play out as far as the leash that Udoka is going to have for these guys with all these veterans kind of waiting in the wings to take their minutes. I did want to mention, it was really interesting what you said about their pick, and every time you say the team name of OKC, I feel like I feel like I need to have a crucifix. I'm like, no, but I feel like if the pick's out the door, it's out the door. And worrying about having egg on your face, like if that really was a main factor in hyper accelerating their timeline, which I honestly believe it could have been, that's just bad. That's just bad management, because the pick's already gone either way. So just make sure you're making sound decisions. Not just worrying about like, okay, like the pick, we don't want to be embarrassed by it becoming the third pick and going to another franchise. I think that's no way to operate.
Yeah, that's a really fair point, because a pick can land where, I mean, like if you convey a pick and it's number 12 and it becomes X superstar, then people are forever going to say that pick became X superstar.
Exactly.
But just kind of jumping into one of the kind of their highest signed vet, which they brought in, which is Fred VanVleet. That one I'm really interested to see how this plays out, and I'm really curious to get your take too. And it's funny, the more I dove into it, the more like swings I would get, where I started being like, okay, here's somebody I'm definitely staying away from, and then midway through I was like, on second thought, I'm targeting, and then I kind of came all the way back around again. And so kind of here's kind of some of my thinking, and maybe you can kind of help me clarify this or kind of get some of your takes on this. The things that make me, the things that I'm interested in with him is that he actually had a pretty low usage rate. His usage rate was 23.2, which is still pretty high, but he's a point guard. And just kind of for comparison, that was the 73rd highest usage rate in the league. Usage rate meaning the percentage of plays that kind of end with a shot, free throw attempt, or turnover. And to put that in comparison, Giannis led the league with 37.3. Fred VanVleet was 23.2. And what's going to be interesting is that he's going to a team that has struggled to, how do I put this politely, share the ball. And so the backcourt last year, Jalen Green was the 28th ranked highest player in usage. Kevin Porter Jr. is the 26th.
Oof, that one stings. I'm not surprised, but just like, KPJ brutal. Does not need to be the 26th highest usage player in the league, and he won't be.
Yeah, it's just in that everybody else in that upper category is the who's who of these all-star, all-NBA guys. And so on one hand, I'm nervous about their ability to share the ball, but on the other hand, he's obviously been able to thrive in a lower usage. And even with that lower usage, I mean, 23.2, he was from the trade deadline on last year, he was the 19th ranked player in fantasy. A really, really productive player. Now, the one thing that makes me very nervous again, and I'm just going to kind of vacillate back and forth, is
please vacillate.
He's coming. I'll vacillate away, but he's coming from the Rockets and Nick Nurse, where they just play their starters into the ground. He was averaging 36.7 minutes a night. We're just talking about all these players in the Rockets. There's no way he gets anywhere near these numbers. So I would expect a dip just based off of the fact that he's not going to be playing nearly as many minutes as that. And then just to finish up the last kind of point I have, and then I want to hear what you have to say, but is the only thing that then flips me back around, and I'm like, well, okay, well, maybe again, like was curious about just what the pace of play was going to be like. So last year, the Rockets were 16th in pace and play. Toronto was 25th. So Toronto had one of the slowest a number of possessions in the league last year. So going to Toronto at 16 is really good. And then I was curious, what did Boston do in their 1 year under Udoka? And that's 23. So, if you figure they're probably going to land somewhere between 16 and 23, you're looking at maybe about 3 extra possessions a game. So maybe that will kind of help out with some of that minute loss. But I'm kind of curious. What do you think about on Fleek?
Well, I think the first thing that jumps out is that there'll just be no need to run him into the grounds like Nick Nurse was famous for doing anymore. And so, from a fantasy manager's perspective, I think he's one of those players that if you have him all season, you have a few itches during the year to trade him because you're just like, these knees are going to wear down. Like, and they just rode him, and you were worried the wheels would fall off. I mean, that's how I feel when I have him on my teams. So I like what you said about, VanVleet. He can play on or off the ball pretty well. So I think he should be fairly interchangeable with Amen Thompson in particular. Amen Thompson, watching some of his summer league tape and just kind of looking at the backcourt, I consider for VanVleet, his ball handling and his passing was like really impressive, like more than I had realized. There's one play that stuck out where Jabari like threw a pass out of the post, and then Amen like quickly like caught it, saw the perfect angle, and like within 1 second, the ball was back in Jabari's hands for an easy layup. And like I just didn't fully realize he had that in his game. So I think you're going to see a little more off the ball shooting from him, and just kind of being, like what I said about Marcus Smart last week, just being kind of a leader of men, that whole thing. And for fantasy, I think maybe instead of torpedoing your field goal percentage, maybe he can get it up to like the low mid 40% range, 43%, 44. I mean, I don't think that's totally unreasonable. So
yeah, it was 39 last year, which was a woof.
Yes, exactly. So like, yeah, maybe his efficiency goes up a little bit, his usage goes down a little bit. But yeah, I think he's one of the safer players that we're going to talk about today as far as fantasy.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, that seems really fair. The Amen Thompson, I am curious, what position do you think he's going to get the most run at? Because you hear different people peg him in anywhere at such a wide array of positions, and I feel like that's what I'm really curious to see how he's actually used in that offense. Is he the backup point guard? Is he Dillon Brooks' backup? I don't know.
So there's a Rockets, the Houston area reporter named Ben Du Bois, and I was using some of his information for research, and his initial projections for depth charts at point guard have Fred VanVleet starting with Amen Thompson and KPJ. So I think, and then, just kind of watching his film, and he averaged about 6 assists per game with the G League Ignite.
Overtime elites, yeah.
Overtime elite. All those names kind of run together. It's like Gatorade flavors. It's like Arctic Chill. Like, I don't know.
Oh man, I just bought the lemon pepino, the cucumber flavor today. Oh, that's the best flavor.
It can be nice. I'm more of a vitamin water guy now. I grew up.
Oh, okay. Oh wow. We need to get him on as a sponsor.
Actually, that's old information. I'm more of a body armor guy. Anyways, enough about sports drinks. I think long term for me, Amen Thompson is a point guard. I think that's his best fit. I think that's, especially if the backcourt of the future is Jalen Green. Jalen Green sure as hell ain't the point guard. So yeah, I think that one of the main questions.
That's a fact.
I'm just going to toss this to you now. So one of my prompts I had for you are, what positions are Amen Thompson and Jabari Smith best suited for long term, both for the Rockets, but also to unlock their true fantasy potential? I think Jabari is another fascinating one. Did you have any thoughts on Jabari and how he fits with Sengun, and like where you actually think in today's modern NBA he should be to unlock his fantasy potential?
Yeah, he almost seems like a Cliff Robinson type to me a little bit.
Oh, Big Smokey.
Yeah, and so for that reason, I kind of see him. I think I see him at a 4. And you look at what his defensive numbers were last year. His block rate was actually, or his average number of blocks per game, not his block rate, was in the top 50 of all players as a rookie. So he does have a little bit of being able to defend the rim on defense, and he's clearly his game is a stretch 4. So I see him as a 4. I think he can slide up to a 3. Clearly, he'd be really good. But I think just with their logjam of players at the 3 that they're trying to develop, I think I would see him starting at the 4 and ideally kind of bulking up a little bit and being in that position long term.
I gotta stop you there because I'm so distracted by your Clifford Robinson comp because I think it's a great comp. And I also just want to let's have a little Cliffy corner. For anyone under 32, any of the Zoomers out there, can you just tell the people who Clifford Robinson was? Because I feel like he's a name that gets forgotten. Who was Clifford Robinson, man?
Cliff Robinson is the owner of a weed shop in Portland called Uncle Spliffy's. That's a true thing.
That's a nice thing to lead with, yeah.
No, he was he's one of those players you often hear this, from these older generations. You're like, wow, if that player could have been playing in this in this time period. He was kind of a stretch 4 before there were stretch 4s.
Or it was a term or something you wanted to build around at all.
Exactly. He was a long rangy trailblazer that was playing in the 90s and really kind of had that length to his game, that that versatility, that especially in that time period where you're expecting your force to be down on the post, Karl Malone-ish. He was a lot more spread it out and kind of do everything. So I think he would have fit really well in today's NBA.
I love that. To keep it in the PNW, I think of him like if Detlef Shrimp could block shots.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think I love those type of players back then. So for me, Jabari long term, I could see him as a stretch 5. Watching
5.
But he is so versatile, man. Like also watching, particularly, I watched I rewatched the Blazers Rockets Summer League game. Jabari Smith has really improved the off the dribble offense, like mid-range game. He's got some little dribble drive stuff mixed in. So I'm looking forward to seeing the diversity in his offensive game. And we know he's a versatile defender. So that actually brings me to can we talk a little bit about how do you see the balance of minutes between these 3 players, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith, and Tari Eason? And then, anything you had on any of those players, go ahead and hit us with. But I feel like that's where I feel like the real squeeze is going to be. Who's going to be getting squeezed? Who's getting the squeeze?
Yeah, the squeeze is the real big question with this roster. One last thing on Jabari Smith too, as far as his summer league went. The thing that I was really impressed. I mean, he was clearly one of those guys, and there was a few of them were summer league, and perhaps we're going to do a summer league pod on this. He was one of those guys that played a couple games and was clearly better than everybody else and got shut down. But the element, which isn't a total shock for being the number 2 overall pick, but the element of his game, number 3, you're right, that was really kind of popped to me was the fact how often he got to the line. In 2 games, he shot 27 times from the stripe, which is really, really good. He made 23 of them. So if he can carry over, even a little bit of that development into the regular season, then I think you kind of got something, because you could tell he was one of those players that before the All-Star break and after the All-Star break were 2 different players.
100%.
And so I'm curious to see if he can do that. He got to the stripe 3.9 times in the regular season. If he gets up into the 6s, then I think you have a real catch on your hands. But as far as that squeeze goes, we're both Tari Easton fans here. He's from Seattle, so he's Northwest guy. Speaking of Northwest players,
not talked about enough. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, but he's gonna get squeezed. I mean, I think he's gonna get squeezed.
I think Udoka's gonna love him, dude. I'm concerned about
his defense.
I think Udoka's gonna fall in love with him, man. Like he closed out on a 3-point shooter. I think it was your boy Shannon Sharp. I think it was Shaden Sharp. He was like defending somebody kind of like around the top of the key, right above the free throw line. And he like switched off, and it wasn't even the guy who was covering. He just like out of nowhere was all of a sudden blocking Sharp's 3-pointer. It was nuts. And then he ended up dunking on the other end. And I was like, Udoka's gonna love this guy. And why did they sign Dillon Brooks?
Yeah, I mean his defense in his few minutes he was getting was amazing. He averaged 2.1 stocks after the trade break. So
that's nuts. And like 21 minutes.
It's crazy. He's like one of those guys that you project when you do the per 36. You're just like, well, let's just stop that. There's no way that can be. That's Walker Kessler numbers or something like. Yeah, I mean, it is going to be interesting, and I'm glad that. And I really what I have been like building this whole thing too is because I want to ask you about your boy Alperen Sengun, and so I guess the main thing that I'm curious about is he was great. I mean, he was very good last year. He was very good last year. He was the 94th average player, 72nd total. If you're punting turnovers, he's 59. But the thing that I'm curious about is, and the reason he wasn't higher, you only get 29 minutes a game, was first off probably Silas, but really he fouled at an insane rate.
He did. He hacked a little bit.
He averaged 3.4 fouls a game, which Jaren Jackson Jr. was like highlighted as this guy who like fouled like crazy. He averaged 3.6. So the question I had to you is he going to stay on the floor enough to be a top 40 player this year or not?
This is kind of how I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to turn a prompt into a response for you, because it's all the same. It's all fluid. My concern is that Ime Udoka is just going to fall in love with the defensive versatility and the offensive interchangeability of all kinds of lineups not featuring Alperen Sengun. I'm just picturing their switchability on defense, getting out on the break, filling the lanes. They're going to have a lot of guys who can pass the ball, some guys who can shoot the ball, but pretty much there's a lot of lineups you can throw out there where they're all going to be able to defend, switch, and I'm just a little concerned that Sengun is going to get like Valanciunas next year. That just popped in my head, but like, I just feel like there's going to be lineups that work with him and lineups that don't. It's going to be really hard to predict week to week. And I think he's going to be frustrating to own. And I vowed that I would never let anyone else touch him. I'm sure a few of you in our league are going to accuse me of this being smoke and mirrors. And I'm not saying I'm off him, but I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit because I just think that the skill set that Jabari Smith Jr. brings is just much more of in the Udoka mold. And so I'm concerned. I'm still a firm believer in the talent. Buy low in Dynasty. If there are any Dynasty bros out there listening to this, if during the season, if you can extract some value that way, if this season doesn't go as planned, because long term, I think he has top 20 upside in some formats in Dynasty. But next year in particular, as they figure this thing out, I'm pretty concerned.
I'm going to push back a little bit. I'm going to say that I feel you're concerned, but I'm wondering if it's your concern based off of your own previous rankings rather than consensus rankings a little bit. That's just like a hunch I have. But I mean, I do think the one thing I think maybe is in Sengun's favor a little bit, and I totally feel that's a really good point with Udoka loving defensive players. And Sengun, although he puts up pretty awesome fantasy defensive stats. I mean, average 1.8 stocks a game is really good.
Yeah,
you take that. That's really good. But I mean, the one thing I'm hopeful with his value is that with this new kind of roster, they are able to put out 3+ defenders in their starting lineup between VanVleet, Brooks, Jabari. So, I mean, hopefully, you can hide them a little bit. You can get a little bit creative, and that offensive talent is enough to balance the roster a little bit.
Yeah,
that's one thing I'm hopeful with there.
Thank you. I needed to hear that. The reason I was trying on a very uncomfortable outfit when I was trying on that kind of way of looking at Sengun. So yeah, it's an interesting place to put myself. And maybe there'll be some improvement from the player himself. He seems like a pretty driven player. It's not like he doesn't have the tools to be a plus defender. It's not like he's a horrible defender. He's not a turnstile out there. He's not Enes Kanter or Yusuf Nurkic out there. Yeah. So even though Nurkic,
I'm gonna read two quick stat profiles here. You have 15. These are 2 second-year players. One was a historical number. So 15, 9, and 4. The historical player is 17, 10, and 5. The historical player is a little bit better. The historical player is Jokic. I mean, when you kind of go across, their stock numbers about the same. Their threes numbers are about the same. So
for a particular season,
for both of their second years,
sophomore seasons. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that there's obviously then Jokic went on some explosive growth, went all the way up. So not saying Şengün's going to do that or have the opportunity to do that, but if he does, if the minutes are there, I mean, he only averaged 29 last season. If he's able to get into the 30s, like you got a great player. But that is the question that we're asking ourselves: is what will he?
Are you gonna sing Third Eye Blind's Jumper to me regarding my boy Şengün? Asking me to step back from that ledge?
Yeah. I'm sure they're probably currently playing at somebody's state fair right now.
Sure.
Third Eye Blind seems like they must be on the state fair circuit, no?
I think they're one of those bands that's surprising that they still like can sell out a decent size arena. They just have like irrational fans that kind of like translate to the next generation. Yeah, I put them. I mean, I put them on like on the par of like the Goo Goo Dolls as far as how many tickets they can sell. They kind of surprise you.
Wait, they're Goo Goo Dolls like selling out good venues?
They're doing 4 or 5.
I mean, I like Goo Goo Dolls. Goo Goo Dolls are totally fine by me.
Sure. Yeah, I actually saw them at the winery we worked at. Shout out Mary Hill Winery. Yeah, they put it like 35,000 in the seats, 3,500, not 35,000, Jesus, but like 35 for they're not on the casino circuit by any means. They're playing wineries and stuff.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, the winery get good concerts.
Okay, enough about wineries and the Goo Goo Dolls. Third Eye Blind. Let's get into the real meat of this. And I just think I want to talk about it a little bit. So I'm gonna let you know what I'm worried about, and I think we're probably on the same page here. So when looking at the young guys and projecting them out and having our wish list for the kind of usage of minutes they can get, I'm going to call this the Dillon Brooks effect. And this is my concern with him. I think that he is going to assume that contract they handed him, the 4 years, 80 million, kind of means like, hey, they want me to come over here and jack up 20 ill-advised shots a game. I bring my grit and my intensity and my, defense first mentality. But the price of that, the Dillon Brooks tax, is 20, jacking up, going 4 for 19 every game. I'm just concerned that and if there's any coach, I guess, that's going to push back at Udoka, that could get ugly potentially. I mean, maybe we'll have a fist fight on the sidelines. But
yeah,
have you given that much thought as far as like his mentality coming in there? Is there any hope that he's going to accept the role that fantasy managers want him to have for the other 10? Okay.
I know. I think you nailed it. I love that analogy of the contract tax. I think that's just fantastic. But no, I think he is the player who he always is. He's kind of come down, but even on those exit interviews, he was talking about how he is a higher scorer, and maybe as he gets a little bit older, he kind of becomes a little bit more efficient. There is a little bit, perhaps the half court offense is a little bit better in Houston, maybe, I don't know, but no, I still think he's going to be jacking up all kinds of shots. But I think they kind of knew that, and that was kind of the price of entry.
Thank you. Yeah. Are you interested in talking about Dillon Brooks, the fantasy player, at all? I got nothing on that, but would it be irresponsible of us not to?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I ran through most of what I had to say on him last week, but just kind of to kind of hit some of the highlights that maybe I missed, or just kind of run it back is, I think the curiosity is that he averaged 30 minutes a night or last season for Memphis. Will he get that? I don't know. And also the other question too is, we just have him penciled in as a starting 3 here, but realistically, he's almost more of a 4.
Wow, that's weird you say that. But
he play a lot of that.
He could, and I hate for you to say that. I almost want to play this game. Who are we most willing from Dillon Brooks to take away from next season? It'd be nice if we could take away from KPJ, but I think other people are going to be doing that. Shout out KPJ.
Yeah, KPJ, I'm really curious on what his minutes actually end up being. I feel like that for me, I have highlighted as a question, and we'll get to that when we get to the guards too. But yeah, I mean, I think Dillon Brooks is going to be one of those guys that is not a long-term hold on your roster,
Right.
plays a lot of minutes, and so when you're sorting on a Thursday or on a Friday, and you're
3 and
needing
4
to go for
nights.
points, or you need X number of categories, you're just gonna see like,
Yeah.
oh man, he's top of these two categories that I need on my waiver wire, and he's gonna end up on a lot of rosters for a lot of the season, and then dropped on a lot of Mondays.
That's sad. Yeah, that was depressing. Okay, let's what do you got? What do you have on the Rockets backcourt?
That is one thing I'm really curious about, because I think and that is going to be, I think, a giant challenge for Udoka with what does, because I think we've all just penciled in, it's you just paid on Fleek a ton of money to be your starting point guard. You have Jalen Green.
I love how I have to interrupt you. I love how committed you are to saying on fleek, just in case you're not noticing the subtlety there. Listener,
I can't not. I
know.
I didn't even realize that I'm doing it. I'm that far down the rabbit hole of that one.
Turn.
But yeah, I mean, I think we're all just have been kind of penciling in. KPJ is significantly worse than those guys. He's just going to be the guy that suffers. And I think that that's going to come to a head, because I don't think that he's the type of player. I mean, you're talking about Dillon Brooks being the type of player, just it kind of accept, 10 shots a night. I see the same with him. And I think that's going to be really curious. Now, I mean, because do they find a way to get him 25 minutes a night?
Yeah, man.
Maybe.
I'm happy. I'm excited
not?
to disagree on this one. I think that what's developed with Kevin Porter Jr. in Houston, and I talked about it a little bit last season when I was watching some interviews, some press conferences, preseason interviews.
Wow.
And I think Kevin Porter Jr. is loyal to Houston. I think that if the plan is for him to play 16, 18 minutes a night and get to run the second unit, I think he's going to accept that. So that's my bold prediction for the episode, that Kevin Porter Jr. Is a back end of your roster / someone you're weaving in and out based on, how he does in those minutes. I do think he'll get sub 20 minutes per game, somewhere 16 to 20 minutes, and I think he'll accept his role.
Oh, I have a Jordan Clarkson type.
He's gonna have to, man. Houston, I think if he blows out of there, and I think he's got his head on straight. I think he has some good people in his life, and he's come to a good place. He was always going to think he's better than he is. He's a very talented player. If it was a game of pickup, at your local, playground, he would be a top 5 pick always. He's super talented, but yeah,
this is a great playground. I mean, like my playground, like just a bunch of bunch of dads around here. Like you're like, oh, I don't know. I guess I'll go with yeah, I'll go with you.
Yeah, no, this is a lit playground. This is like pro-am playground.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I have a good feeling about it, and I hope it turns out that way for him.
Okay, I like that take, and I think he would be a fantastic fit if he buys into that. That really should be his future, and I hope that's true. My big question mark, and honestly, it's going to be one of my biggest questions in the entire fantasy system is who is Jalen Green? What is his ceiling?
That was existential.
Yeah. But I mean, like realistically, like what's his ceiling? I mean, I kind of wrote down a couple comps, but I'm curious if you have comps or also to kind of get your overall viewpoint of what is Jalen Green in 5 years. I couldn't find a perfect one, so I had John Wall who couldn't pass, Gilbert Arenas that was a little bit more explosive.
You know who popped in my head first?
A shorter T-Mac, and then the last one that I thought was kind of the best was Starberry.
I like that. Who popped in my head first, and his style play is Isaiah Ryder. J.R. Ryder.
Isaiah Ryder, yes.
And there's so many ways his career could have went. He's awesome on 2K. I mean, the guy is just sick. So right now he's a concept player. He's a highlight package. He is 30-minute. You put him on for 30 minutes on YouTube, and you're having a great time. But yeah, he's still in that JR Rider phase of his career. And hopefully he has a much longer career that's filled with some all-star appearances, and he seems but they each kind of have something going on where it's style over substance a little bit at this stage in Jalen Green's career. JR Rider remained at that stage throughout most of his career. So hopefully he's able to come out of that stage. But right now I have his kind of style of play and how he fits into a team as like a modern JR Rider.
I like that a lot. That's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm curious on what he is. He didn't, he got better, last year, his second year into the league, than his rookie year, but it wasn't quite that jump that we were expecting. And so I feel like the question is, can he take that, that Anthony Edwards jump? And I feel like that's going to be the big question. So because from his rookie year to his sophomore year, his rebounds, assists were really similar. He went from 17 points to 22. So he did take a leap up, but some of that was minutes based.
Usage,
but really,
as you mentioned.
Usage, yeah, big time. But I mean, I think the story with his season last year, as far as a fantasy manager goes, is he was far too tantalizing and explosive to drop. Are
you speaking from experience right now?
I drafted him. I kind of had him
33
highlighted. This is like, is that what it was? I believe
33, brother.
Okay, wow, nice memory. Yeah, I mean, I was, there was no chance. I was far too afraid to drop him, but he was also so terrible that there was no way to trade him. He was the 187th ranked player in fantasy last year as far as averages go, which is terrible.
You seemed like you were having a really bad time. We had a trade on the table that I ended up not going with, and I forget the player it was, but it was pretty sad that I wouldn't give you that player for him. I can't remember. There was something on the table there.
Yeah, it was a trade that we had on the table, and then
Jeremy Grant.
While I was waiting to confirm it, you traded him away.
James gave me a better offer.
Yeah, bastard James. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, despite all that, I mean, he still averaged 22, 3.7, and 3.7. So in specific builds, he was really good because those are really good numbers. But the issue was he just torpedoed you in turnovers and crushed you in field goal percentage. So it was. The goods were pretty good, and the lows were so awful. That I want to buy in on him next year. I know I'm going to talk myself into it, but at the same time, he's a really scary player to go for because I bet you're going to have to pony up pretty high to get him.
He's great for a style points build.
Oh yeah, that's good. I love that build. When you're at the bar, people are like, "Dang, you got a good team.
Look at his roster.
You must be in first place." You're like, ninth.
Right. Let me ask you this about Jalen Green. There's no way his usage goes up this season, correct? Can we start there? Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so you have this score first guard who's been able to do whatever he wants for the first couple years of his career. He's going into his third year, right?
Correct.
Okay. So could we, for fantasy, could that potentially be a good thing? If you have other playmakers on the court, there were so many shots that he jacked up last year that were just kind of like, this team's going nowhere. These people came to see me. I'm going to be a star. I get to take my lumps. Shots. And maybe if we can reduce those shots by 40%, we would have a better fantasy player at a better price, because there's no way he's going to be more expensive than that sophomore bump price people, for the sophomore breakout people were paying last year that you paid. He's going to be cheaper. So if he's more efficient, potentially, just within the flow of an organized offense that isn't run by Steven Silas, he could be a nice bounce back candidate.
I like the way this conversation is going. I'm talking you back up on Alperen Sengun, and you're talking me back up on Jalen Green. I feel like this is like a support pod.
Oh, that's so nice. It does feel really good. I'm glad. I never wanted to go this way. I wanted us to be fighting and doing hot takey stuff, but no, we're just kind of coming together and licking each other's wounds.
Yeah.
Not licking.
Oh, that's what happens with the Rockets. Yeah, because you kind of think there's nowhere to go but up. The other thing that where there's nowhere to go but up is if you're drinking any other coffee except for Steelbridge coffee, the only way to go up is by switching over to Steelbridge coffee. Check out the website. It's steelbridgecoffee.com/PTJ. 100% fair trade, organic, locally owned, small business. If you go onto that site, you get 4 pounds of coffee, shipping's included, just directly to your door, price built in, no handling, really high quality premium coffee. And it really is going to increase your game quite a bit. It's not going to be a Steven Silas run operation.
Was that an ad read? Are you being paid?
I am being rated, but that was yeah.
Was it that you asked me about? Oh yeah. I can't remember. Someone said Slava Mavadenko. That spurred
right.
Mamokinichvili. You're like, is that an ad read? Are you being paid?
Nice. That was the most taken back ever. And when his name came up this, like at any point this summer, I would immediately go into a fit of laughter, no matter what I was doing.
I'm glad those links are still live. Yeah, go check that out. You can get, what's it, 8 pounds of coffee. You get one of the
4 pounds
sweet vintage. You can get 8 if you order 2 orders. So
that's
that's
a really strong point.
But yeah, our first partner remains strong, so go check that out.
Yeah.
We got any more? Can we dig a little deeper on the Rockets? Do you have any forecasting for if Aaron Holiday can ever become relevant, or are you going to stream Patty Mills next year in some disgusting desperate attempt to win 3-pointers or anything like that?
I feel like we named every single player that is likely to be there. I think the biggest thing is going to be that, or I guess kind of my main question to you, I guess, is, let me phrase it this way, is how many Rocket players are going to be full year holds?
How many Rockets players are going to be what now?
To be year-long holds.
Oh, for the entire
they're going to be on
exactly.
Yeah.
VanVleet, Jalen Green, you just hold on for dear life there. Jabari, Sengun. I would not drop Eason. So are you counting my fingers? Is that 5?
That's 5.
And then I think Amen Thompson's one of those players that if you bite that, you go ahead and hold on. But there can be rookie guards that's just not worth it at some point. So I could see him potentially being a drop. So I'd say 5 for sure. And then on the border, Amen Thompson, depending on your format. In a points league, you don't drop him. Same with KPJ in a points league. I think he's just the usage he's going to get with the second unit potentially could be useful in that format. A player we didn't mention is Jayshawn Tate still exists. And he was the rookie sophomore game MVP one time. So
wow,
they're gonna have to find minutes for him too. Cam Whitmore, I'm really interested to see how many minutes he gets. Can't imagine it's much more than garbage time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just it's an endless sea. And then I guess Jacques Londale, he'll get some minutes. He doesn't seem like much of a threat, but yeah, I guess 5 guys are locks to be on your roster all year, and then a couple question marks.
Yeah, which is I mean, is pretty interesting. I mean, I feel like that most rosters you look at 4, maybe 5, and you just kind of rattled off. Sounds like 5 with the potential of a 6. So it is a really curious roster, and I feel like it's going to be. I hope that we get some like long-term clarity pretty early rather than a week-to-week situation.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned at the beginning of the pod, I think reading the tea leaves a little bit, training camp, preseason games, which aren't very long, but just kind of get an idea of what the drumbeat is in Houston, following some good beat reporters, like my boy Ben Du Bois. You can follow him on Elon Musk's X Gon Give It To You machine. Do you understand that reference?
I don't.
Okay, so do you know that Twitter is no longer called Twitter and Elon Musk has changed his name to X?
I do know that.
Okay, then X Gonna Give It To You is a DMX song, and I can just picture Elon Musk like before he released it, like rapping to himself in the mirror. X Gonna Give It To You.
I can picture that too.
It's horrible.
Yeah. Do you think the oh geez, we need to wrap up this podcast because now I'm going down the rabbit hole. But and I'm wondering if the overall trajectory of the Rockets is going to be decreasing, because they went from like Houston being NASA central to now our space program is mainly run by by Elon Musk and SpaceX, which is based in California. So I wonder if the overall trajectory will never rebound for the Rockets.
You've just given me full Galaxy brain, which is just appropriate for the end of a Houston Rockets pod. Well, I'll launch into this sort of stuff. Yeah, I hope that was useful. Hope that was entertaining. We wanted to try out a pod where we just kind of dive into one team with a bunch of question marks and just kind of get in there and kind of figure out what to make of it. So this pod obviously will remain relevant for some time. Please do follow Projecting the Jump on Twitter. You can follow me, Flying J, on Twitter, X, whatever it's called. And the handles will be in the notes of this podcast you're listening to, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can find them there as well. And yeah, we're on YouTube now, so I hope you guys are enjoying that. If you would like to watch our faces for this long, or just have it in the background, or whatever it is that, however you consume it, we're just happy you are.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, for Nature Unclean, this is your boy Flying J, and we will talk to y'all soon.
Cheers.
All right. I love you.
Love you too, man.